adult figure. Let's speak to John Redwood, former Conservative MP, former Cabinet Minister too. John, good afternoon to you. I mean, the plot seems to thicken by the minute on this. It's just unbelievably curious. Hardly covers it, really, as to what's going on here with Chagos.
No, it doesn't, and you're quite right to point out the difference in the figures. It is going to be around 30 billion in cash paid out over those years, as far as we can see. I don't think the Prime Minister fully understood what a net present value was. I think he probably said to his officials, give me the lowest plausible figure you can, because I want to understate all this.
Yeah.
They did a very clever calculation which pretended that it doesn't hurt as much to pay money in 50 years' time as it does today, so they knocked that down. But the actual cash amounts you're going to be paying are going to be bigger. And so everybody else just thinks that was misleading us all. It's quite obvious that it's going to be more than 10 billion, which is the 100 million a year for the 99 years. And it's going to be considerably more if inflation takes off. And then you've got the other bits he didn't add into the sum. So no, he was trying to pretend this wasn't going to cost us very much. But even worse, he was saying we had to do this because we were about to lose these islands with a court case. Now, he and his lawyers should know that International Court of Justice, which gave an advisory opinion some time ago that it would be nice if we gave the islands to Mauritius, has absolutely no power over this because Britain joined that court with a very clear statement in the original agreement that they couldn't judge any dispute between the UK and a Commonwealth country. Yeah. Well, Mauritius is a Commonwealth country. So the government lawyers should know better, and they should admit that the ICJ can never come to a definitive judgment on us. We have a perfect legal case to say, you don't do that.
Here's the thing, John, somebody must have said that. This wouldn't have been one sort of duty solicitor that just popped up one day. These would have been very experienced international lawyers that are around the table. At least one of them would have gone, well, hang on a second, they don't hold sway over this. They don't have the capacity to make a legally binding judgment or ruling over this.
No, well, it should have been pointed out. Maybe it was, and maybe they got some other excuse for what they were saying. But it can't be the ICJ, and I pointed all this out and made it publicly available. Yeah. All you had to do was Google the agreement that took us into this court, and it was one of the very first clauses which said that there are some things this court can't do, and anything to do with a Commonwealth country, it can't do. There are also issues over whether it can do defence and nuclear.
Do you think the Conservatives would have come, had they been in power, would have regrettably come to the same conclusion? Because there was a lot of, we spoke to James Cleverly just yesterday, this was on his watch when there were certainly some discussions. I think under Liz Truss this was being discussed too. Why did no one in those two governments say there's nothing to discuss here?
Well, I think that was the conclusion David Cameron came to, and he was the final Foreign Secretary in that list. And so for the run-up to the election period, David was saying, no, we're not going anywhere near this. And I know that because when he first became Foreign Secretary, I had the advantage of a working lunch with him quite early on. This was one of my big asks, for goodness sake, don't dream of giving the Chagos Islands away. The officials are negotiating over this. He immediately saw the point, and we never heard anything more about the Chagos. So I'm quite sure that David fully understood it. Why did Liz Truss and James Cleverly allow negotiations? Well, they were very strongly urged to do so because they said Mauritius had some points. But the fact that they never said yes to any of the proposals shows that they too didn't think it a good idea to give the islands away with a great big dowry, because there was absolutely no point in doing so.
Well, and give them away to somebody who never owned it in the first place.
Yeah, never owned it in the first place, 1,000 miles away. It's not just down the road, it's the equivalent of the other end of Europe. So there's absolutely no reason. And the Chagosian Islanders that this government's completely ignored didn't want to give it to Mauritius. They had some arguments about the way they were treated in the past by the United Kingdom. But the whole point about asking the Chagosian Islanders to leave the islands when they set up the really big base was that the best possible security for that base is to have no one else anywhere near it.
Yeah.
So it's just military professionals handling difficult weapons and very fast planes and complicated ships, well away from everybody else. and nobody spying on them, no fishing vessels just offshore and all that kind of thing. And the other thing was it had a huge environmental benefit because there could be no commercial exploitation of those islands and the fishing grounds and all the rest of it, because it was uniquely for the UK and US navies.
Do you think, or do you sense, and I have no evidence for this, John, but is this sort of Commonwealth guilt that Keir Starmer is suffering from?
Well, I think it's that and lawyeritis, and I think, lawyeritis can be very dangerous in a statesman or politician.
Worse than anything.
Because international law is very different from criminal law. Have you broken the criminal law, you are a criminal, you go to prison. That we all understand that, and we want that to be properly enforced. International law is about disputes between states, and it's much better to sort these things out by discussion between states. And it's very difficult to enforce international law against the states. I mean, who was going to enforce something, even if we had?
That debate could have gone on for another 100 years. I mean,
you've got the most powerful navy in the world, the United States, using this as its main base outside the United States of America. Who's going to turn up and say you can't use this anymore?
Why do you think Mr. Trump has sort of signed this off, as it were? There was a sense before he came back into office that he wouldn't, that he would be, incredibly concerned about this, but he seems to have caved in as well.
Yeah, I think it's very disappointing, but my sources are limited in America, but they suggest to me that the Americans don't actually think this is a particularly good idea, but they were humouring the United Kingdom because the United Kingdom wanted to burn up some of its limited political capital on squeezing through this rather dodgy deal. I think that's what happened. And what a tragedy, because we need all the bargaining capital we've got when you've got an administration which is being as tough as it is on allies as well as enemies around the world.
Indeed. While we're talking about Mr. Trump, he's been vocal again. I mean, his vice president's had a pop at the Prime Minister. Mr. Trump has too, criticising Mr. Starmer's net zero plan, suggesting we should, well, to quote him, drill, baby, drill. He said prioritise the North Sea over renewables.
Well, I think you know my position on this, and I think I got there before President Trump
did.
I very much think we should get our own oil and gas out of the ground rather than importing. The gas is particularly annoying because those who think the only thing that matters is getting CO2 down should recognise that if you import liquid gas, as we now do, instead of having our own gas down a pipe, it's 4 times as much CO2 doing all that because you've got to get it out of the ground miles away. You've got to liquefy it using a lot of energy. You've got to use a lot of energy putting it in a tanker. You've got to use a lot of energy to get it back to gas again. Whereas if you have your own gas, it's just down the road, down a pipe, and you don't have to keep changing it.
And some of this, you might, again, it comes back to the point I made a little earlier, John. You'd think somebody around the desk over there at Ed Miliband HQ would point this kind of stuff out. I mean, today we've also got the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, telling Miliband that the push to achieve clean power by 2030 and net zero plays into the hands of Beijing.
Yeah, I know. And you and I and others have been going hoarse explaining these things. I mean, I've been explaining this gas thing to them for years. I mean, it started under the Conservatives, and now Labour have made it far worse because we got to the point where the Conservatives said, yes, you know what, we are going to get some of this out. And then Labour come along and say, oh, no, you can't do any of that. For net zero, you've got to close the lot down. And the first thing that happens is the CO2 goes up. Yeah. And so it is completely potty what they're doing. And I don't know how you can help get this across, but yeah, well, I really do want them to do the right thing. And this is completely the wrong thing. Dear energy and more CO2.
Indeed. Maybe Mr. Miliband missed the science lessons. That's all I can say, because some of this is pretty basic stuff, John, right?
Yeah. And on the spying, I take advice from people who know a lot more about the subject than I do. I don't know very much about spying. But I'm sure it is possible for the Chinese to put things into all these machine controls, all these chips that we're buying from them. Yeah. The British government concluded under the previous government that Huawei could be a threat to all our communication systems. True. And made changes to that. Well, we shouldn't let them infiltrate the whole of our energy system. If we're going to buy all these solar panels and put up all these wind turbines, we don't want Chinese controls, which could suddenly flip a switch for us.
Well, that's
and
what
again,
we hear, yes. If there's
we
a
were
kill
told
switch.
about all these green jobs. All the green jobs are in China. They're not here. We're not making our own solar panels on the scale we need to.
100%.
So what's the point of it?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think we ever will, for that matter. I'm sure there's some companies out there doing their very best to get in on the market, but they ain't about to take on China. Listen, John Redwood, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.